I'm so glad to have Kaarel Kotkas with us here today, and you're from Veriff. So before we get into it, could you give us a little bit of background on who you are?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Kaarel, I'm founder of Veriff, and Veriff is a company that enables every website and mobile application to match people with their government-issued ID. So who I am, I'm like Chief CEO at Veriff. Some say Chief Energy Officer, so I take it.
So multiple meanings to the CEO. Okay, so Veriff at its very core is essentially a real identity service. Give me a little bit of background on why you decided to found this company. What was the problem that you came across in your real life that was the impetus for you to create it?
For me, when starting Veriff back in the days, now a bit more than 6 years ago, it was something that the document verification, it wasn't accurate, it didn't scale, and it was such challenging to go through this verification flow. Whereas I was a bit surprised because actually nowadays technology is so good, so we could make the identity verification online even more secure than physical face-to-face authentication. And
Before we get into how your product works though, I would love to take a quick minute and take a look at what the legacy process was like. So before you created this product, if you wanted to match a real identity to an online identity, how would you go about doing that?
So back in the days, it was something that people, mainly financial services, that needed to do the identity verification. They saw it as a compliance demand. They saw it as something that you needed to do according to the regulators. And this was such a troublesome situation for them where they just asked people to upload your copy of ID. But uploading someone's copy of ID was I would say, like very
Cumbersome?
It was cumbersome in terms of a process. It was very hard for the honest people and sometimes very easy for the fraudster because they had it already document ready to just upload it. But what I understood that there was no good ways to validate based on picture alone, and that was something that how I got into the space now more than 12 years ago. I beat the system by just pretending to be 18 years old before I really was. And this was something by changing the date of birth on my document and uploading, and all my orders and payment solutions got confirmed. But 2015, the same issues were present. And then I was thinking like, let's fix it because it's so easy to be better than physical face-to-face authentication with the technology we have. It now is like just putting those pieces together.
So when you talk me through the process of how Veriff works. So I understand that the legacy infrastructure was just really cumbersome, very difficult for both the entity that needed the verification and the user that was trying to get verified. Talk to me about how the process has been simplified and made more friction-free with Veriff.
I think it all starts with a user experience. And this has to feel so much better than basically police stopping you and asking for an ID. It has to be less stress and meaning that people feel very comfortable and they know what they specifically need to do because very many people do online at first times in their lives. So this is something that we made sure that Veriff's flow works seamlessly on all the platforms, that no platform is left behind. That this was something that we focused very heavily on together with the Skype engineers that are now working at Veriff, like how we could make it work with this video-first approach across all the platforms.
So what I've understood is that Veriff is primarily a B2B product.
Exactly.
That allows the end customer to do something as simple as, can I just take a picture of my license and you guys will verify it? How does it work?
So the flow is basically, we ask people to show their ID, whether it's driver's license, passport, or different types of government-issued identities.
Right.
And this is something that we just ask, show your ID, show your face, and now in the background we are doing multiple checks in order to ensure that it happened real-time voluntarily by the right person. And also making sure that this person is unique, because we all are unique.
Right.
And we just need to do and make it sure in identity verification process with checking different, cross-linking the information we're having.
Right, so that someone else is not trying to pretend to be Kaarel.
Exactly.
Got it.
And this is quite a bigger problem in terms of recurring fraud, as fraud is always this kind of a hopping target. It goes from one to another.
Right.
That's the reason why there's a need for being somebody who is independent and sees across all the other services as well.
So would it be accurate to say that as your network grows and as your company grows, your ability to be able to identify someone as unique is going to increase in
yes,
a linear
Veriff gets
fashion?
better with every single verification we are doing, and this is why different financial services companies join us on this journey.
I see.
We're like glad to support Monies and Wise and rest of the top names in this industry.
Right. So there are other companies out there that do real identity verification, right? How are you similar to your other competitors and how are you dissimilar? In other words, what's your competitive advantage?
I think from our side, definitely the flow is something that you have to show your ID and face, and this is something outside looks quite similar. But from our side, we are focusing instead of pictures, we are focusing on video first approach by asking already people to show their ID while us analyzing on a frame by frame basis what's going on in the background.
Right.
And this is something that enables us instead of 3 picture analysis to analyze over 2,000 different data points. So once you are having 2,000 data points per one verification, you can highly automate the sessions without compromising on accuracy metrics.
Got it.
Veriff is a match for businesses that are global. By us, like supporting nearly 10,000 different government-issued IDs. So our bet is that all the tech companies are competing on a global market, and financial services need to think about it.
Right.
As well.
So most of your competitors, if I'm understanding correctly, they use still frame. And you
Exactly.
guys are opting to use video because it's just harder to be fraudulent with video.
Yeah, think about like living in the times of deepfakes and relying on pictures alone for making decisions.
Absolutely.
So definitely it's something that is very, very important for us to utilize as an information piece.
Right.
And those are the 3 things that we can do. It's like we can be like 30 times more accurate by having only 0.2% false negative and positive rates.
Wow.
And then it's like twice the coverage as a nearest competitor and 6 times faster with 6-second verification time on average, making it very real-time experience and more convenient for people to use globally.
Up until very recently, when people wanted to utilize identity verification, it was because they had to, right? How has that changed in recent years?
I think in the recent years, people are starting to understand that there's so much data breaches, there's so much fraud happening that I believe everybody knows at least somebody whose credit card information or credit has been like stolen. So I think the identity verification hasn't seen as a friction anymore, but also it's demanded from the end users, because when you don't do checks relevant, then you also as an end user feel insecure. Maybe somebody else on behalf of my name can access to those financial services.
Right.
So we are moving towards the future that identity verification with this additional step enables to build up the trust between the platform and the user. And this is, I believe, essential for enabling more and more serious services moving online.
Interesting. So that's really interesting. So customers that came to you maybe 5 years ago were doing it because they had to. They had to do it for compliance or regulatory purposes. And now they're realizing that it's much more than that. It's not a hard thing for them to do. It doesn't create extra friction, and it actually helps build the relationship with the consumer. Is that right?
Exactly, because definitely you can trust the ones only you know. And that's the reason why more sophisticated tools are required for this process. And now we're living in a situation that people trust. Taking a selfie, it's like people take selfies quite often. So what if like using it, utilizing it for the verification purposes is something that financial services are now saying that also it isn't a friction, but to some level their users demand it to keep themselves safe and making sure that no one with this kind of a public secret number or SSN number that everybody is asking to keep it secret but enter it everywhere. So all the things you really want to make sure that you still have a stronger tools to build up trust online.
That's an interesting shift. Definitely not that I would have intuitively expected. Are you seeing any other changes in the ID verification space?
I think definitely one that I introduced is to move towards stronger customer authentication. And this isn't like the regulatory or the company shift, it's like the whole industry is evolving as much. And another thing is about continuous KYC, making sure that you can always keep on building up the trust and doing verifications more than once.
Okay.
For high value transactions or account recovery purposes.
Got it. So now that we have a really good handle on where you guys are, the problem that you're trying to solve, talk to me a little bit more about the future. What is coming down the pipeline for Veriff in the next year or two?
In the next year or two, it's like us still seeing that there's a lot more to do in order for us to enable financial services going global, because they need a partner to save up money on non-compliance and fraud. And this is something that we see in the following years. We'd like to keep this partnership approach of rather having less amount of companies who love us instead of like thousands who more or less like us. So that's something as a strategy we've been like keeping and trying to do in our business. More in this identity market, we see that reliable and scalable trust is one of the biggest opportunities in technology. So that being said, we also would like to go towards like how we can be in a future in this position that the passport isn't issued by the governments anymore, but it will be issued by Veriff. That's something that we are building, this kind of a network effect of different businesses to build towards the mission, so we can really enable people having equal access to services from everywhere. But as long the best tool to verify people's are government issued IDs, because identity always need to be authorized.
Right. Thank you. I think that's
Thank
a good
you.
place to cut it. Thank you so much for spending time with us.